Hi everyone, how are you doing? Hey, my name is Valerie Caña. I'm currently I'm a product designer and a senior visual designer at a fintech company in Henderson, and I'm usually the monthly host for the Vegas UX UI Meetup. So thanks so much for coming. You can, if you want to join us on LinkedIn, here's a QR code. It's something I've been continually developing and trying to make more active. But yeah, feel free to join so you don't lose the awesome connections that you may make today. All right, cool. And then I also have my fellow presenter, Victor Evangelista. He's an incredible senior software engineer, and I'll explain why he's here today. So if you've been to my previous meetups, you'll know that I always start by describing the design thinking framework. But before I continue, can I get a hand of like who is a designer here? Just to know like my audience. Awesome. Who's a developer? Cool. And like entrepreneurs, marketers. Awesome. Okay, cool. So the design thinking framework is a process that UX designers use to bring a product to market, where we empathize with our users, we define their problems, ideate solutions, we prototype those, some of those solutions, test them, and then implement. And so every talk, I focus on one of these phases. Today we're going to focus on implementation. But actually, what a designer can do, and basically this in the past few phases, to make implementation a lot easier. So since it's February, and it's all about love and professional relationships, I want to talk about designers and developers and our collaboration with each other and how it's so yeah, be my co-pilot, like how are we going to align and how are we going to ship this product? Historically, there's a lot of tension and misunderstanding between these departments, but the best designers and developers can overcome that challenge. So I want to start off with this great meme. So a designer's dream is a developer's nightmare. One second, let me realize I'm not part of the Wi-Fi. 1 second.
Hotspot.
1 second.
Can we close the door?
Oh yeah, thank you. Okay. Have you guys seen this? Hold on. Ooh. Oh.
check this out.
Okay. Oh gosh. So, oh yeah, oh my God. Okay, cool. So yeah, unfortunately, it's usually like that. When I was like a younger designer, I was just like living in my own dreamland. I'm like, oh, let's push the design, make as many fun things as possible, and had like no consideration to my developer, and that led to a lot of tension. And then actually, like a lot of work had to be redone because I learned, they just couldn't be implemented on the project timeline. I also put this note here that also just to let everyone know, there's like I think that the audience is a mix of people who are new to UX, or like there's a lot of like seasoned people. So this talk is usually just a kind of like intro, an idea, and then we'll like talk more in depthly about it. But anyway, I put this note here that you can work with some technical engineers, and they focus on like more of the back end, like how we're actually going to make results work, and then there's product engineers who focus on like the impact. And it's really great working with product engineers because they're usually like on the same page as I am. But with a technical engineer, it doesn't matter, they're gonna get paid anyway. So how do we convince them to really put a lot of effort into the feature they're building for us? So it's really important to come together as a team, because a lot of bad things happen when designers and devs don't collaborate. So number one, devs are less likely to be flexible to product needs. Like I just said, if we don't show them the reason we're building a certain feature, then they think that we're just like telling them what to do, and they're not our code monkey. And like in my philosophy, even though we have a title of designer, everyone in the team is part of this design process. So like that needs to be respected. Secondly, handing off features is a lot harder. A lot of times I see like, or me, even me as a young designer, just like pass off designs without, and we have like maybe we have a kickoff call, or we have a kickoff call and then we have a handoff meeting, and I'm just like, here you go. And then they don't really understand the behaviors needed for all of the interactions. They don't, they just don't understand like what's happening in this design, because we need to have like a more open conversation about it. And lastly, it just isn't good for organizational cultures. So in operations-based companies, they place like design teams and the development teams separately, and we're working in silos. And so there's no transparency in the work that each team is doing, so that it creates redundancy, a lot of like inconsistencies, and just considering that a dev's time is worth a lot of money, it's going to affect the bottom line. And then whose fault is that actually going to be? It's probably the designer's fault. Do you want to like add to this?
Sure. So the topic here is when designers don't work well together, right? Designers and developers don't end up working well together. By the way, I'm Victor again. I'm a senior software engineer. So for this, I would say that by the time it comes to program and create the actual product, you don't want the developer to think any longer. And I know that sounds bad, but by that point, they should be a code monkey. That's where I'm going to disagree. But before then, I agree. Collaboration, sync ups, not working in silos, all of these things are super valuable. They help increase the quality of the product ultimately, and then also keep the timelines realistic. So I think you have good points ultimately.
Okay, awesome. All right, so
Sorry,
yeah.
Like, I don't understand what do you mean by the time it's time to program, you want your developers to be code monkeys?
By the time it's time to actually make the feature, I would say by that point, you want to already have had the conversations that needed to be done. Discoveries, yeah. Ultimately working together to come up, working together with business to come up with the vision, working together with marketing to make sure that, there's a fit. But by that point in time, by the time it reaches the developer, you don't want them thinking about any of that stuff. You don't want them to be thinking about marketing. You don't want them to be thinking about which color palette to use. This should have already been figured out. Does that make sense?
I agree, but I think what you're failing to say, by the time it reaches the developer, it's probably too late. Because you just mentioned like the design, the discovery is already done. If and then if you're talking about collaboration and you don't bring your developer up in front, like the designer, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to say is bring the developer into the conversations early, like into the brainstorming sessions, let them have their say while we're designing the prototype. But when the final deliverable of a designer gets to the dev, at that point he's already had a say, he's confident in the decisions made.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you have a point, exactly. I think we're both saying the same thing. Yeah. Ultimately, there's collaboration that occurs outside of the IDE.
Yeah.
Before
your hand touches code.
Yeah, before your hand is touching code, there's all this collaboration. But by the time you're touching that code, it's already
Yeah.
So it's pretty much not just a conversation, but have all the requirements gathered and pretty much
And Valerie will go,
right,
yes.
before it gets to the developer.
Yes, and Valerie will go over more of what that looks like.
Oh yeah, sure. Did I miss a question?
Yeah, and I think that's why it's really important for you to have a good product manager. And that's why Agile is very important, because with Scrum, for example, Scrum, everyone starts working immediately and everyone is in Agile there's transparency. So you're not working in silo, you're working all together, and all those requirements is bouncing on the product manager and the business analyst to work in sync with both of you to merge together to have a transparent idea of whatever you're trying to do.
Absolutely. That's great. Are you a product manager? Yes. Okay, that's why. Thank you. Yeah.
Shout out.
Shout out. Cool. Yeah, and if that's not happening, just like yell at your product manager to like have you guys sync up every so often. Okay. Another meme. Sorry I annoyed you with my question about the feature I'm developing for you. We don't want to have that feeling. So what can we actually do for our designers? What can we do as designers for our developers? Number one, we already talked about having regular communication after kickoff and before handoff. Like I've said, in more like less mature companies, like they think those 2 meetings are the only things, or the only times that we talk. But we have a whole sprint in between that. So it's important to be actually like on the same team, because otherwise they're going to make assumptions about your design. And I saw that a lot, like early on in my company before I tried to like restructure our meetings. But like design was handed off. There was no annotations about behaviors, and then they tried to like redo components and redesign things, and also because if they're using a different framework you didn't even talk about, there's limitations there. So anyway, there was no alignment. Secondly, we need to have a clear understanding of what developers need to build and why. I think I already kind of touched on this, but as a designer, we're always advocating for our decisions and having a story of like why this is important. Because I could tell like working with Victor, because we've been working on like our own app actually, like his mind is checked out for certain things when he's working for the man, but his mind is like laser focused when his mind's engaged and really interested in the product. Therefore, he's going to find the solution to make the design work. Otherwise, he could just simply say, "We can't do that." Okay. So, and then thirdly, we want to have opportunities to criticize the proposed design decisions at all times. So, I mean, of course, we always say, don't take your work so personally, because you shouldn't be married to your ideas. They're not, don't consider them your babies. Try to like ideate all the time and be flexible. And also try to understand each other's point of view as well. So if I'm trying to come up with a solution, it could just be one thing like, hey, we need to have a way of flipping through like these different pages. I think we can do that like with this component. What do you think? And he could say, no, that's not possible because XYZ, or the way that the way it's organized, like it's gonna have to like call so many other things. It'll take too much time. It's gonna increase this page load or whatever. So it's good to have that conversation so you understand more of these limitations.
Makes sense. I'll say that I'll kind of touch on what you said a bit earlier. I think I noticed on the slide, you were talking about product engineers and technical engineers. So in the industry, ultimately, I don't think there's this specific distinction, but a product engineer ultimately, yes, focuses on the product. The technical engineer maybe is working on, like you said, the back end, the maybe more in the background processes. So for let's say a product engineer, at this point, I would say that they would need, like when we worked on our app, one example of a time that really helped, because we're coming from scratch, right? We're moving fast. We're just trying to build something quick and put it out and get it out there. We put in the effort to actually go ahead and do a wireframe where we talked about all the different edge cases, all the different steps in the app and the website where a user could go through and we went through all the user flows, sort of to clear up any confusion. So ultimately, yeah, having these sync ups, these regular sync ups throughout the process, to even clarify where maybe we missed something, maybe we missed a step in the flow where someone is going to drop off or something like that. Having those types of regular sync ups matter, and I think Valerie, just through her experience with working with developers, working with product managers regularly, she's able to set up these regular sync ups throughout the process. So I think, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think like in the beginning, because like you're also acting as like the product manager / owner as well, because it was like his initial idea for this app. He talked vaguely about the flow, like it should be this, this, and this, and this. And then it's like, okay, can you remember that? No. So instead, like we should sit down next to each other, like open up FigJam, and then we created the task flow together. Yeah.
Yeah, like, I just want to add, because I am a designer developer, so I do a little both.
Mm-hmm.
And, it really helps me to have, and this would probably come from like a PM, but it really helps to have like a scope. I call it a project scope, where you have like a list of features, exactly what's needed, that way that that's being translated. So I feel like that might be something that designers and developers can work together on, is like making sure that everybody's on the same page about what exactly is needed in this design, right? Or in
Yeah.
this feature.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. There's something that usually has worked for myself, which is you have 3 documents that are necessary. There's a design ops, or like the things that designers need. Then you have a product brief or design product requirement document. And then that has a lot of the like PM, business needs, design needs, engineering needs collaborating. Then we also have an engineer ops doc, and that's kind of like what the limitations for design should be, like the architecture of the engineering departments in order to have that. And once we have those 3 components, then we're able to like design forward. I think it would be really helpful to
Yeah.
to share that.
Exactly. No, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, documentation is like the most important thing. And those documents should be collaborative as well. So like in my company, we use Jira. I'm sure like a lot of people have used Jira. But there was a question of like, oh, who's actually going to make these user stories, which is basically, it's describing like, this is like the user interaction, and this is the product requirements for this certain screen. And the question is, everybody should talk about that. And the product manager can bring everybody together. But it should be everybody's responsibility. Yeah, cool. Thank you, everybody. Okay. So there's ways to bridge the gap. Again, we're going to kind of like repeat some things, but early collaboration, pair programming, and co-creation. So basically, what that means is, again, have the developer there early on in the conversation, sit down together. And actually that really helps with motivation, rather than just, like usually it could be, okay, great, like as a designer, like I get this brief and I work it out on my own, and then I can like showcase that work. But then you could take it a step further of, let's sit down and let's modify it in real time together, rather than like trying to get notes and like doing it separately and then going back, and it's just too much back and forth separately when you could just sit down together. Secondly, give and ask constructive feedback loops and reviews. We've already touched on that. Explain your design process and how you reach those conclusions, so they can, again, that brings clarity to the product vision. And if the developer has any notes, you should really listen to that as well. I think it's important to, respect their point of view, so you can reach your vision. We've already said, don't be precious about your ideas. Write proper specs. A good rule of thumb is, when he said, by the time he touches code, he wants to be a code monkey. So you can write specs, so a 4-year-old can understand it. Make sure there's no room for any kind of assumption. And also, as a designer, you can take an active part in high-level conversations and implementation. So if there's implementation meetings, maybe just ask to sit in on them. And a lot of times, maybe if you're just starting out, or even if you're a little more seasoned, they'll be talking about things you don't understand. But that's just an opportunity for yourself to grow and understand how this specific dev team works out their process, and these are the environments they're working in, how it's going to get into production. We can also do cross training and skill sharing. This is really this kind of ties into design systems as well. So when I work with developers, I'm really lucky when they know visual design. But a lot of times I like to give them a rundown, teach them about our color system, our type scale, this is the grid we're going to use, this is the reason why, and then simultaneously they can teach me teach me a little bit about code so I can speak their language. As designers, we don't need to know to code, but at least understand HTML, CSS, PHP, yeah.
So I love design systems. I just want to say, I love design systems. How critical are design systems in your day-to-day work? How heavily do you rely on design systems? Is it more verbal back and forth, or are you actually going through the design system and putting in the codes for components? How does that look for you? Yeah,
for me, it looks just like that. I created by talking with my developer. Oh, sorry, not with Victor, but at my own company. I actually have a governance process that I modeled. You guys can look it up. It's the vanilla design systems process, and it's a governance method in which okay, if we need a new component, what happens? So it's okay, product team needs a new component. Does it already exist? No. We have discussions. A project brief is created. We talk with engineers. Is this something doable within your framework? Yes, let's continue. We make it. Then it goes through another round of review through all the teams, and then it's handed off to the developer to put into the test environment. If it doesn't work, we do another round of iterations. If it does work, great. Then there's another round of sign-offs, and then we can put it in.
What did you call it? Vanilla? What exactly?
The vanilla design system process. Yeah, it's governance, vanilla governance or something like that. I could post it in our LinkedIn. But yeah, so and then it's placed in the design system. So I place it in Figma, and it's really great because now you can add that snippet of code. But then also, I think Victor you use Storybook to make components as well.
Yeah, so I'll touch on that. So one tool that's really useful that I've found over the years when working with the designers is Storybook. And I'm sure many are aware, but tools like Storybook are tools where you can actually put the designs, the components from a designer into code, but in an environment where it's clean. So it doesn't live in your product, it lives in Storybook, in this sterile environment where you can just see specific components and what they can do, how they can change. So ultimately, we didn't do it for all the components because, again, we're trying to move fast. We're trying to break things. We're trying to, push it out. However, for some components, it is good just to have that alignment. So that would be my snippet on bridging the gap. I think having, yes, design systems is critical. And the next layer on the cake is, okay, what is the tool that's actually connecting that developer to the design? And Figma has improved in a lot of ways where you can get a lot of code snippets from the design straight away, but you can go even closer just by implementing these environments. Go ahead.
So I'm in like low code, no code space. So they're implementing Figma where you can upload these Figma files into like a platform, right? And it can take all of Figma into that. Is Storybook something like that's going to get there? Is it there already versus Figma? Or
I think for low code,
just integration.
Of course. I think for low code, there should exist something like Storybook, and I'll show it later as well, what exactly it means. But ultimately, figuratively, right, it's the gap between a designer and a developer filling that. Having something a designer can look at and understand, hey, yes, you fulfilled all these requirements, bullet point list, and the developer can go and see what is missing, what ultimately wasn't thought out, and hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully you just have a one-to-one conversation where everything works great ultimately, and I think that's most of the time what happens if you're doing it right.
Okay. Oh yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I think in general, design system is not just about libraries, right? Design systems is that you have the same language from a user and a user experience, a user interface standpoint, that whoever is using your app will know exactly what a form looks like, will know exactly what the interaction is supposed to be. So it's not just about, okay, we're gonna go through these, structure and say like, okay, now I have a new component. Because if that component doesn't even match your entire design system, then you still failed as a design system, right? I think in general, that's what we use design systems for, is for that, when you look at that app, you look at Microsoft, like you know exactly what Microsoft looks like.
Yeah.
You know what Excel looks like, even Excel, PowerPoint, whatever. Same, experience, same thing with Apple, right?
Yep.
It's the same, because they have a very strict design system and how they want their apps to experience. And
Yep.
when you're building components, it just has to align with that language.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah,
Right?
you know
Yeah.
when you're using a Google-like product when you see that material.
Material
Design.
design, yes.
Well,
Yep.
just to piggyback on that, it could go as far as if you know, for example, if you're a designer and you know that your developer is working in React, then you can write properties. With Figma's advancements now, you can literally set up properties to make it easy for your devs to export components, right?
Yep.
So yeah, that really does help when you're on that same page and
Yep.
using the same language.
Yeah. That's awesome. Great stuff. Okay. Anything else you want to add here? We're good?
I think we've touched on.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Go back.
Sure.
Bridging the gap, I think there's something missing.
Sure. Yeah. Let's add it.
So, it's not necessarily about, this is the designer's vision and this is the engineer's solution.
Of course.
I think what's missing there is from an ethnographic standpoint. Whenever you're actually seeing how a user uses your app, it shouldn't be that the designer is the one that's leading it, right? Or designer is the only one that sees it. I think exactly what you guys were saying is having a more cohesive, non-siloed development. If you bring your engineers really up forward, where I'm sitting right next to the user that's actually doing that job, and it's like, why? And then because the mindset is a designer has a different mindset compared to an engineer has a different mindset.
Of course.
You might see something like, hey, why is he doing 5 clicks on doing that? And the designer's like, oh, I can make a designer mindset would be like, oh, it would be great if I do this. But no, for you, you'd be like, why can't I just push it forward? When you click this, it goes straight to that, because then I can put all of the data in the backend, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
So I think it's not just about sitting down together, but it's also about sitting down together with the user, maybe in discovery, whatever you guys do that.
Yes, there's discovery that takes place, absolutely.
Yeah, I think, I just wanted to add, I think what they're saying is, since it's like an intro, that like this is how systems are built from the ground up. So when there isn't a foundation, there needs to be a siloed of a design review process in order to understand what those components are. Then they're placed into Storybook in order to have that as a component that can be reusable and is within the design system.
No, yeah, I understand now. I'm saying from a like discovery perspective, if you have an app, or if you're trying to build something, I think there's value in not just having the product manager sit next to the customer, but the product manager plus your designer plus your engineer. A engineer.
Of course.
UX researcher would come in.
Right.
Of course.
The conversation is about design and like developer relationship. I think that's why they just kind of hyper-focused on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, but you're
totally good. Yeah.
You're absolutely correct,
Yeah.
though. Of course, like ultimately, it's about the product, and there is a user that you're trying to reach. So that is a consideration throughout the whole process. Go ahead.
I think it's from a developer standpoint, if I'm being 1,000% honest,
Yeah.
I would not want to sit in on that meeting.
Oh, okay.
I'll be 100% honest. I would zone out. I would not pay attention. I would not care. All I would want at the end of that meeting is to say this is what you're supposed to do and this is what they came up with. Because if I'm being 100% honest, that's the UX designer's job. That's why there's a whole different title of UI UX versus developer. I think I'm all for like being involved in the collaboration in terms of what's possible, what's not possible, maybe in terms of the tech stack or like what medium you're using or whatever. But I think if I honestly was brought that far forward, that far early, I would check so far out. That's just me speaking.
No, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's true.
Well,
Yeah,
one-
because
one-
There's a concept called, I think, flash build. There's a concept called flash build. It's a concept where you, for example, you go to a shopping mall and then you bring your developers in there, and then you go to like a sunglass place where people are coming and buying sunglasses, and then you bring your developers there to build an app. You don't know what you're building, but just based on what the users are doing and how they're interacting, the developers and the UI UX are able to understand like what they need, and then you bring out your MVP from there, and then you keep iterating and all of that. So for me, like it would be really nice to bring users and like developers closer to users. I agree with that completely. I feel like it will give you like a different understanding about how you want the product to look like at the end. So that's my own opinion of bringing users together.
Okay, yeah, no,
And
for sure.
users to the
Yeah.
Developers close together.
I think I
Yeah.
know why you're thinking, because you're a product manager.
Yeah, I think so.
yeah. You're just good at
true.
this.
Yeah, it is true.
I've been a
Yeah.
product manager for 25 years.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I was a designer previously at Apple, and one of the things that we would do is actually everything that we're saying right now is like not what we do, which is really funny. Like in real life experience, the research is done. Like when I worked at Apple, the research was done beforehand, and there's like a whole team, and they're independent. Like they don't care about like working with designers or developers because that's already documented, and that's just handed off literally in a meeting. Like here's the TLDR. This is all the things that you need, so we're not wasting time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then then we would do the design. I would focus on that for like 3 weeks. Once I came up with all the reasons why it wouldn't work, then I brought it up to my stakeholders like PMs or engineers, and then it's like, great, then they would ask me questions to flush those out, and then they're done. And we're good. But when I worked for Meta, it was totally different. It was like totally agile. Like everybody's doing their own thing, don't worry about things. So what I'm saying is like I think there's different structures
Depending on the company.
Exactly.
the project.
Of course,
Exactly.
of course.
Waterfall, of course, like you're gonna have issues.
Yeah.
With agile,
Like, this is
it's
ideal,
gonna be-
but this is not it's not realistic.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course,
It's really
of
like,
course.
I feel like what you're talking about right now applies to the real life situation. Like she said, in
Yeah.
real life, no one really is agile.
Yeah.
No one. Like, in the office, no one is agile. So I think what you're saying is, I wish it could be like that
Yeah.
conceptually, but it's not possible.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I should have, like, no, these are really great points, and I'll make sure to bring it up next times. That, yeah, it's a lot of different cultures and, you know, project management styles in different companies. I get, yeah, but for this audience, since like we focus on like on startups and we wear a lot of different hats, and a lot of times like what someone does it's in a small team, they'll have like a lot of impact. So I guess like, would it be correct to say that the directors of each department, they would go through this process until like?
It's very weird because like for Apple, it was only 5 of us. There was 2 UX designers, 8 PM, and 1 engineer for that project in an organization of like 54. But because I started my career first 4 years in startups, just like straight off scrappy, we were still not doing these like routes. It was very much just like there wasn't the wireframing process. It was about like designing things. It's true. We didn't have time. And so we were just literally just going from ideate to prototype to test and implementing. Then we can define if there's time, but many times it was just on scaling because we needed funding. So it was just like needing all that money. If not, we didn't have jobs. So, yeah.
Makes sense.
Cool.
And then of course there's the other element as well. Like you're saying, you need funding, you need revenue, you need this and that. So this is an ideal world, obviously. I've been in situations where there is no design. You just put buttons on the page as an engineer, and and they click and it works, and that's it.
And then you'll test after, maybe.
Yeah,
right?
make money and then hire a designer. Go ahead.
I just want to know if there's some kind of evolution, I guess, into what she's saying, like where you kind of design on the fly or then go into this. Like, was there, maybe that wasn't happening 4 or 5 years before Figma and some of these advancements or something, and maybe that's happening now more in a structured way? Is that fair to say? I'm not in the design world, so I don't know.
Like you mean like where developers are building something without a designer? Or like
that and like just having this, I guess, more of the structure. It seems to me like I've only been doing this for 5 years, right? But I went more of like dealing with designers who are like, yeah, I'm envisioning this. I want it to look like this, and they tell you that, and then they're like, go, right? Versus now where there's like, hey, I want it to look like this. Here's what I want it to look like. You know what I'm saying? It takes out the abstraction. I think, is that like a solid evolution, or is that still company by company?
I think that's a company by company basis. Sure. Yeah, but I mean, but also, you know, like whatever your own work style is, like I'm just a firm believer, like, because when I went into my company, it was kind of like that. They didn't really have like that many designers, and they, I guess, just bought like whatever design system from some agency, and didn't really like serve them, and then they were making a lot of assumptions, and then I could have like followed that, right? But I wanted to restructure it. Like I just knew that wasn't the proper way. So I also understand like what you're saying. Like if you wanted to work a certain way, you're gonna have to advocate for that. If not, and if not, that's totally fine. Just understand what you're not doing either.
It's a lightning in the bottle situation where you have good chemistry with your entire team of different disciplines. So you have that ability to where like the designer visionary is like, this is the general idea, and the instead is like, oh, get this, let's do something with this. And the PM is like, I'm all for this. Lightning in a bottle, like it's beautiful, but I rarely run into it, and I do miss that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I'm so like kind of not standoffish, but I think I rarely run into it too, where I'm like, it doesn't ever work out. I think on one project, like, 100% honest in my entire life, I'm like, whoa, this was.
I think it's also.
Of course.
Could this be my entire career?
Of course. No, of course. Of course. It's just, I think the flavor is a little different as a technical founder, you know, versus non-technical. You have these ideas, you have these visions, and you need to put those on the shoulders of the people you're working with, right? Versus if you are technical, if you are the owner, if you're in there and you are getting a further grasp of all of these different specialties, then you're much closer to it. You were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, I don't think it's an evolution between that design. The design, I think it's more experience too. Because if you go with like a a new designer that just got out of college or not even, like design school or whatever, like they have great ideas, but not necessarily the knowledge of knowledge. Like, I have all of these, like, can you make it? Like, no, you're crazy, right? As they grow within their career, now I know how to storyboard it. Now I know how to wireframe it. Now I know how to, all of these. Oh, now I have design systems. Oh, now I can use components. Oh, I have React and I have Material and I have, I can use that.
Exactly why it's a lightning in a bottle scenario.
Yeah.
Everyone has to be at the same level, not just skill but confidence with each other and trust.
Yeah.
So yeah, it mostly doesn't happen.
And I want to get back on track.
Yeah, no,
One
for
last thing to add. So I think another part of it that kind of goes into it is the priority that the company puts on each aspect of the process. So for a lot of companies, and it's sad to say this, but I feel like for a lot of companies, design is an afterthought. Like a lot of companies are like, let's just build something, and they go with this Elon Musk kind of mentality, build and break and build and break, and let's just keep doing that, right? But I personally think, and this is more subjective, I personally think that we're getting to a point in the tech industry where there's so much competition that the only way for companies to start differentiating themselves and standing out is by focusing on the user experience and the design.
Yeah.
So where we used to be in a place where it's like, oh yeah, let's build and then let's make it better and let's build, let's make it better. I think that we're entering a new phase of the tech industry where design and user experience is going to be what separates the good from the great.
It's funny you mentioned that, Nick. So I'm going to give an example why I said this is a lightning in a bottle scenario for my instance. So, and you can see this example all over the place, but when I worked at Willing Hill, I don't know how many people know Willing Hill, the sports place, I did a lot of the UI, website stuff design. My dev team, brilliant. We worked together, we had solid Scrum practices, we would have stand-ups, of check-ins, etc. We operated like a family without saying we were family. I could talk to the VPs, I could talk to the product owners, like they were just friends next door. I could talk to customer service, I could talk to our CEO if I wanted to. You don't typically find that in a company that's scaled. And within our individual processes and creating these projects rapidly, on the fly, working hard as much as we're playing hard. I would honestly say we only work 4 hours a day, a lot of us, but we work a lot within those 4 hours. And you're right, user experience is the key. What people don't realize is that you can design something and engineer something so well, but if your customer support, if your marketing is not on point, that entire structure falls apart. So we weren't the best designed at the time when I was working there, but we had really good customer service and marketing support, all in one streamlined experience. Nowadays, when you're looking at Willing Hill now, it's become Caesar Sportsbook. You have really great graphics, great marketing, but the service is really bad. And that's what happens when you scale like that.
And I think the reason why a lot of either VCs or CEOs don't focus on the UX or the UI element is because a lot of designers are not knowledgeable in business.
Yeah.
And so they don't know how to translate the ROI from a design perspective into the bottom line. And that's one of the things, my minor was in business administration that helped me grow, and is because of that.
Yeah.
Because I can tell them hey, you do realize that this issue is because of that, and this is why you need to convert. The reason that innovation is done in larger companies, if you're going to go into Meta, it's really annoying because they focus just on build now, screw if it's broken. It's because that gathers more funding.
Yeah.
And that's not talked about. They don't really mention why are you breaking and why companies are building this funding.
And culture ends up getting, they gatekeep and intentionally silo you so that other people, not so much that they're not interested, they don't want you to know.
Yeah.
Right. And that creates its own inconsistencies and unsustainable practices over time.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you. And just for
Sweet.
everyone to know, this was always a community kind of conversation. So even though we're presenting, always feel free to interject. I absolutely love it. And actually, we can add to this list as well if you have other ideas. But I talked about kickoff, and there's always questions I like to ask the product engineers before designing. So we can get in line. So first, what are the technical constraints, of course, or limitations we need to consider when designing this feature? Are there any existing frameworks, libraries, technologies that we should leverage in our design, such as our design system? What's the preferred coding language or platform for implementing this feature or product? Are there performance considerations we need to keep in mind when designing? What data or APIs will be needed to support? Are there any security or privacy concerns we need to address? What are the expected browser/device compatibility requirements? Do you anticipate any integration challenges with other systems or services? And sorry, that was a copy. But yeah, does anyone have like any other thoughts of like what may be missing here? Things that you'd like to add?
I want to ask.
Yes.
What is the flip side?
Of not asking?
Of what should product engineers, as you call them, ask designers during that session?
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point,
that
because
is
I've had
great.
engineers not ask any questions, and I'm just like, I don't know where to lead this conversation. I don't know
Yeah,
what
that's
you
true.
want from me.
Because if product engineers don't understand the use case, they don't understand the business flow, they don't understand
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
flow,
Of course,
they're
of
gonna
course.
build the wrong thing.
And
Yeah,
I
of
think
course.
that's why designers have to actually like step out of their way and go do a walkthrough, at least for like flows. Because if you show them like user flows to an engineer, like, oh great, I got it, like I know exactly like what I'm supposed to do, or when things are triggered, and if you have like emails, notifications, or things on top of the design, like this is where also it's triggered. But I think that should fall on like the designer side.
But it's because then we're forced into that, right?
Yeah.
Of course.
Some of the best developers I've worked with are the ones that ask the questions, that are familiar with the deliverables that they need to do the best work. Right? But yeah, I've like right now working at like a medical healthcare. I'm talking to the devs. I specifically gear a meeting for us to collaborate in a roundtable. And I was like, okay, so what do you guys need? I can create this. I can create this. I can create this for you. And they're like, I don't know.
And I think that's the reason why you have developers that are code monkeys, because they expect things to just be handed to them.
Yep.
And I think it's also experience, right? So like, because as the higher you get into that senior level, director level, architect level, you have to ask those questions. And I think that's just like the designer has to gain that experience, a developer has to do the same thing as well. Because the best, as you mentioned, the best developers are the ones that are inquisitive, the ones that ask, the ones that, like, hey, tell me about this business case. I don't understand this. Why do we need to do this? This is stupid.
Yeah. And then when you have that synergy, it's such a beautiful thing. They create the most, like, they even share their thoughts with you. It's like, why they're doing this. It's like, okay, let's improve this. The iterations become rapid.
Yep, you can bounce ideas off of one another at that point.
Exactly.
You know, well, yeah, when both the product engineer, as it's called, as we're calling it, and the designer are on the same page, they both understand the flow, they both understand the business need, and that's where you get that energy.
To make it perfect, I don't know, you probably heard of Teresa Torres. If you add the product manager,
That's right.
It's over.
That's Minaj. It's great. That was good. Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to add something.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know where to fall, I guess. I'm kind of trying to figure this out, but if there's like expectations, I think going into any design or any feature, I think there's like when people have ideas of something, they might have their own expectation of what they want that thing to do, and knowing that expectation ahead of time can help navigate what is possible and what's not. I'm dealing with a lot of clients who like, everybody wants AI right now, everybody wants GPT, replication, right? Let's just call it replication. Everybody's creating a chatbot now. Can you make every chatbot look the same? Absolutely. How do you want it to look different? So like expectations of what they expect compared to what is already out there, right? So like ChatGPT is a product that's already out there, so we don't want to make the same thing. We want it proprietary to your company. Things like that, like if there's expectations on that, expectations on like speed, which is another thing we're dealing with of like, can you ever recreate something as fast as ChatGPT? Nope. And people need to know that ahead of time because of what's going into it. Right? Just expectation set, I think. I just don't know where it falls.
Oh, yeah.
I think that
falls under here, yeah.
Bars, though. Like you're non-functional, so whenever you're building your requirements, then ideally you would have to define your non-functional requirements that you don't necessarily think about from a product standpoint, but you have to have, because that helps engineers. Like, okay, well, I have expectations for security, I have expectations for speed. Yeah. Like, is it gonna load up in 5 seconds, in 10 seconds, in 5
Yeah, I was
minutes?
gonna
What is acceptable?
Thinking
Right,
infrastructure,
that
right?
part, the acceptable part, what will they deal with, what they won't deal with, and
Yeah.
how design affects that, because that changes what they look at. If it is gonna take 5 minutes, then you guys need to implement another feature that says, hey, there's gonna be a loading,
Mhm.
or
Oh, yeah.
something. So
Yeah,
that
exactly.
we need to handle that on our side, but there's also a handle on that side too, you know what I mean?
And I think
So where does it fall?
yeah, a lot of the expectation comes from the user research, right? Because like you need to understand, you have to have a very strong, great understanding of your customer or your user to really define like, okay, well, this is what I'm used to. You mentioned ChatGPT, like ChatGPT or whatever, this chatbot, the UI experience for that hasn't been structured until you find that one company, OpenAI, to say, oh, they made it right, like Google. Like search right now, everything you see, like Google is just like the de facto, kind of like, so I think it's hard until you get that one company that kind of like owns the market.
Yeah.
But it's sad because they all think that UI, UX, and engineers are like wizards. You guys can just create anything.
And before, I think before
And they
there
just
was-
have so many high expectations.
Yeah, they do.
And
Yeah,
when
they
you
think we
guys
could build
do all of
anything.
this, and it's so sad because you're not on the same page. It's just so sad.
Well, if we had time and funding, we could do anything, but it's not always the case, right?
Actually listen. I wish you could do like a LinkedIn post or something, like telling companies the importance of why you guys need to work together, because they all have like crazy expectations. So I think that's a very
Okay.
good thing to add to that too.
I guess this would fall under like questions for stakeholders or demands for stakeholders. I guess, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, that's how it works in some bigger
Oh,
companies.
that's
You
true.
won't do it. Like if I don't have a
So
product
we're
requirement
together.
document, I can't touch it. If I don't have like what the engineers, because one thing that wasn't mentioned was like budgeting. Like if I have to build a new feature that's not within the components, that's engineer time, and that's expensive. So for the companies, like I have to keep that in mind in the budgeting of like, oh, if that is that going to cost them time? Because I'm trying to minimize like having to use an edge. Like what do we already have, and how do we build what we already have?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that goes back to like the vanilla process I was talking about earlier. Like again, like always check, like, is this a pattern we already have? Because then just take that code snippet and go, you know? But if not, like you can see if like, is this a snowflake? And then the product manager will have to decide like if we can move forward or not. Yeah.
Yep. And there's the usual examples, of course, of having that consideration, right? Budget and wanting to move fast for that reason. So there's a lot of designs, a lot of decisions, conversations that are had that all we're doing is trimming the fat off of the idea the entire time so that we can get it out faster, cheaper, and even if it's a more simple design in the end, the work is done.
The time frame also, like what designers should be asking for coding, like, hey, have you looked at my design? Is this feasible in the time frame?
Yep, exactly.
Because sometimes, like, designers can get a little bit out of hand and do something really fun, and then it's like, actually, we can't ship this in time. So
Yeah.
go back and figure it out.
Cool.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest problems in our industry in UX is our compromise to fulfill business timelines. There is such that disconnect where we're trying to create quality, and that biggest pain point of trying to create quality within a certain time frame, we sacrifice quality. We sacrifice better solutions. We sacrifice things that service the UX because business just wants this bottom line to keep the company going.
I think if there was a way to translate, like I think maybe somebody mentioned, if there was a way to translate that to a money standpoint for them, they would hire every UX UI design engineer in the world.
Right.
Like, I think my company just hired maybe 2, and I was one of the people who was like, look, you can't drop all this on our laps as developers and be like, hey, go create a bomb product for this Fortune 5. Like, get out of here.
Yeah.
We need somebody else who this is their job. That's the end all. We don't want to do it no more.
And that's where like engineer, UX, and data come into play. The data, because many times I've noticed exactly that's when you
not
find
nice to
like
work with.
not nice to work with. I
They're
found it's like understanding like what is like how we're translating that. Because many times I've had to like advocate, like, hey, we're seeing, like, for example, a click-through rate, right? It's like they're like, oh, it worked. They clicked on it. I'm like, no, that's not what that means.
It just means something happened, it's not a causation, right?
Apps where, like, they don't get used, and I feel like it's the worst feeling for a dev to be like, oh my god, I spent 10 weeks building this stupid product that you guys asked me to do this stupid blue background, and nobody's fucking using it, and I can't even now put it on my resume because nobody's using it. You know what I mean? So like, there needs to be a way to translate and make sure that like all of this isn't in our lap so that people use it. One, I have no idea what somebody feels when they click a button, but also do I care? No. That's somebody else's job. So like if there is a way to bridge that and make it translatable to like, okay, if you make sure that a user clicks this button and it does this and this, more people will use your app. More people that use your app, more money comes in. There needs to be like a way to translate all of that into one big bucket so that people can want to bring it on and want to do this full roundhouse collaboration effect.
Yeah. I mean, that product validation should have been done beforehand, unless you're in an incubator style
I just
company.
want to add, I think that's the reason why most startups are very fast, because they don't care about design, because it takes 10 weeks.
Yeah, it takes time.
They don't have the money.
No, it's
Right.
not
Or
about
the money.
have the money. It's like,
That as well.
like, I need to be out there now, so I can learn if my user likes a blue button.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's not even about also like the user. It's actually about them getting funding.
Small little
So
piece
they
of
need to just have
grass.
a past concept
Small little
to
piece of grass
sell.
in your hair.
They
In
just
front of your left ear.
If you should
Oh, okay.
sell that basic
That's fine.
building
Yeah,
block
it's gone now.
Okay.
No,
right?
gone.
If that's what you're saying. So if you're saying your foundation is, oh, I just need to make money so I can go to the next thing, then you should make the most money and the best money that you can by saying at that point, if you do this and we make sure that this not only works, but this is functional and the user feels this way, then won't you get more money and then, you know what I mean? It's all like a trickle down, I think, kind of effect.
Yeah, it is a like more logical approach, but what I have found, because I did consultation for VCs in my early career. I've been in the industry for like almost 8 years. So I've kind of been around, for figuring out the steps. And a lot of the VCs don't care about spending that because they will be jumping onto the jump ships. It's about selling the MVP, shipping it out, getting it to whoever, and offloading that to another person who will take on it.
And I think there's just
It's
one
219.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's cool,
You're
cool.
not showing the ROI.
Okay.
And the minute you click on and share and then turn on and show that ROI, everybody's tuned in to like, oh, not only did we build this product and it's worth X amount of money, we can flip that and make triple. Then that's like, oh, I want to buy that button, that one single stupid button that does all of the things. And we want to see what else they can do. You know what I mean? I just feel like it's
I agree.
That's a more ethical way to do it too, because you're promoting better practices. And that's why when you have VCs that want to do the other way, that's a quick cash thing, you don't try not to engage that culture. Because it's like a vote, but I need to support that.
As a UX designer, you just have to do like yes, you should follow these steps. It's just going to be condensed and reduced. It's like you just break it down to like the smallest. Like we need research. Instead of doing 3 weeks, you're not going to do a week. Instead of doing, so you're still following the steps. You're just doing it.
But I don't think it's sacrificing though, because it's still iteration, right?
Sure.
I mean, your iteration, your technology, you're going to iterate on your design too. So it's like, whatever it is, like, oh, I have the great design. If you put it in front of users, nobody's using it, then you've already failed. But if you put it in front of users and say, oh, I know now why they're not using it, then you can iterate on the design. You get better and better and better.
That's
and
what
better.
I'm saying, fail in software, fail fast and fail early. You know what I mean? Like, that's the point when, before you're even in and sold the product, like, fail fast. Don't even have us build the shit.
No, we need you to build it, yeah. I mean, you could do a lot of testing like with a prototype in Figma, but it's really not the same thing.
It's not. Because
So-
then, like, in the end, like if you like, we do a lot of like prototyping, like click dummies or whatnot. It's great for user experience, but once you put data,
Yeah.
everything's gonna fail. Once you put real data, everything's gonna fail.
Oh, yeah, and the interpretation of the data too is a pain.
I hate adding real data to my designs. Like, what? I have to add real data? What's that?
Yep, you do.
That's it. But when you get those numbers and it's good, that's all that matters. So we have like, I think just 10 minutes. I think it ends at like 2:30, or just end now? 10 minutes. Okay. Okay. So I just have like one more section and then basically a time where we can just break out and talk. So last thing is a handoff checklist. So I think we've kind of basically covered all these things, just making sure design is consistent, the design system is up to date, we can link to the components for the developers, it's responsive, all the complex visual effects are clearly described, and the assets can be easily exported. I personally use like Zeppelin, just like a really great handoff tool where I just upload all of the designs. And actually, I could just show like the sample that they have. But like, for example, if this is your screen, you can add annotations and then select the behavior requirement and animation, whatever API call or tracking. And then I make all of these comments, and then when I walk through with a developer, we talk through those things.
What is the difference between that?
So it's really similar, but it's integrated with Figma. But the difference, I just personally like this because it has the ability to add these kind of annotations. You can create wire flows in here. It saves, it has versioning as well. So if your product manager is like, oh, this thing needs to be changed because of all this stuff, I can make that change in Figma and then commit that change, and it shows as a version in here. So it tracks up everything.
Is it paid?
Yeah, it is paid, yeah. I think Figma is working on something similar to this, but not yet. It's still not as good, yeah.
Manually log what changes are made on Figma.
Yeah, no. And for me, it was like working with a PM, because this was before we had Zeppelin. Like, it was just so many comments back and forth in Figma. Like, this is getting out of control. So then we implemented this tool, and it's just been making a load of a difference. It connects to Jira tickets as well. Yeah, it's really amazing. Okay.
Something outside of Jira? Any other?
I don't know actually. Yeah, check it out. Yeah, I'm not sure, but good question. And yeah, then also like it does. Exactly. Also, this is just an example, but it does the wire flows. So when I commit a change, it also just changes it immediately here. Mm-hmm. And then this is another time I can sync up with a PM and the dev. Like, hey, look at this thing.
It changed.
And it changed. So let's work on it.
Yeah. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's a manual make design.
That's like a combination between like a prototype frame and then also the user flow as well. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's a journey, man.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. But yeah, anyone else have other thoughts of things you like to do during handoff?
Well, I noticed that certain designers don't do those flow diagrams like you showed. It was a surprise that I was the one doing it for my organization. But it is critical for devs to have that. Otherwise, they don't know what's supposed to link up or how it's supposed to react.
Oh yeah. Yeah, working in Agile, things were changing all the time, so it was more critical for my team to have it.
Right, and it especially helps devs know what backend stuff going to plug into this feature, and having the designer know, at least generally know that there's certain backend things that need to plug in, and mapping that alongside them, that also helps a lot.
Yeah. Yes.
I feel like this is probably more focused on designer-developer collaboration, but on the designer's checklist, one of the items would probably be, make sure that users can operate the design without any guidance, right? So,
usability.
Through usability
Or
testing. So make sure that your users have no issues with the design and that your initial purpose for the design is met, right? Like the overall user experience. You want to make sure that your design is providing that initial goal, right?
Yes. Oh, these are really great.
So one of the things that irritated a lot of my engineers is if they don't understand the business logic on how the flow is. I think that needs to be a checkoff or a handoff.
Yeah.
And if not everybody does that, and it's important because let's just say if you're creating a calculator and you don't know how that how that function is supposed to work, and you give that, this is going to be a calculator. Here's the design for it. I got some buttons, and then you give that to your It's like, okay, well, how am I supposed to make this, like, what is the logic that's going to make that work?
Yeah.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why I'm not fired from my job yet, because I because I've done my review. It's like the only reason why we're not firing you because you decided to become very lax about your job right now is because you understand business and you understand product. And I was like, okay, that's cool. I understand my job, so.
Of course.
Awesome, cool. I think we have 3 minutes, but I was going to do an activity here, but maybe you could just like take this idea. It's still Valentine's month, but if you want to make a gram for your fellow teammates about something they do that you really love and makes your life easier, go ahead and send that to them. And if there's something that you do that people love you for, send that to yourself. And then feel free to share that with me because I'm really interested in like continuing this conversation. Okay. But yeah, so basically that's the end of our session. Again, join us on LinkedIn if you would like to. And then also, I am rallying people who may be interested in helping give back to the Tech Alley community. So if you're interested in coming on board, like with a committee to improve their website, just let me know. Let's link up after the session. But otherwise, any final thoughts, questions, concerns? Cool.
Access to this document
Yeah, I'll share it and I'll put it in the LinkedIn.
was really helpful. For me, it gave me like a whole new vision about how, how everything should work. And I hope more people can be like you and you that actually put in more, and everyone here that actually put in more effort apart from their like daily jobs, but put in more effort to go the extra mile. It will really help in team building.
Thank you for that.
Really appreciate that. And thank you all for coming out here in your busy lives and sharing your expertise. Like I personally do this just because I love it, and I meet like super cool, interesting people, and I just love like the spark of conversation. And Vegas is a growing community, and I'm meeting a lot of different people who are trying to connect more and more people. But you just being here is a significant part of that. So awesome. So it's awesome. Thank you. That's all.
Sweet.
Okay,
Thank
cool.
you.
Thank you.